But I want to just be a little, shall we say, prophetically provocative at this point. We're in Cappadocia. We're also in the outlying areas of Galatia. Remember, I told you that Galatia is a huge, vast area. Cappadocia is too. What's interesting is, of course, we're just throwing the word Cappadocia around, like, you know, hey, this is where we are. This is where the tourists come. This is where all of these fairy chimneys are. But Cappadocia is in the Bible. So this place has endured for thousands of years under the same name. And that's pretty amazing. We also know that the apostles and the disciples came through here. We're not entirely sure which ones, but it sounds like at one point Peter did, because over in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 2, he names a whole bunch of places, regions that go north of here along the Black Sea, but among them is Galatia and Cappadocia. And here we sit. But there's another part of the Bible that talks about the different peoples. Now keep in mind peoples, not just cities or empires or that sort of thing, but the different sort of peoples of this area. And as pastors, you're going to be very familiar with Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel 38. Of course, 38 and 39, you can't really do one without the other. But this cataclysmic battle that appears to take place prior to the tribulation, the last 7 years of Earth's history. Now, it's been thought by many that it could be also Armageddon. It could be, and I certainly wouldn't argue with you if that's what you think. However, it doesn't seem to fit the scenario. The names don't line up properly as far as where this battle occurs concerning Armageddon versus Ezekiel 38. But as you look at Ezekiel 38, and let me go back to my notes here because they just moved. Hold on just a second here. That's it. There we go. You touch a screen and everything changes, right? First of all, over in Ezekiel 38 and 39, you have, just a second, there we go, right there. The word of the Lord came to me, Ezekiel said, Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog. Now, I'm not going to talk about Gog right now. We're going to talk about Gog when we get to Sardis, because there's a very important reason why we need to talk about that particular character there and the best guess on who in the world is Gog. You didn't think we were going to talk about end times here today, did you? Well, here we are. So the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Gog in the land of Magog. Well, who's that? The chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Who are they? Prophesy against him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. Persia, Cush, Put will be with them, with all their shields and helmets. Also Gomer, with all its troops, and Beth Togarmah, can never say that right, from the far north with all its troops, and the many nations with you. So what does that have to do with where we are now? Please understand that as Ezekiel is writing down this prophecy, the people of Judah are now in exile by this point in the book of Ezekiel. And as he's reading these things to them, he's telling them not about what just happened to them, but about something that was going to happen in the distant future. Something that, as far as history is concerned, none of these things have been fulfilled. More than that, he's also talking about regions that they somehow have knowledge of. Now, how they have intimate knowledge of these things probably has to do with silk roads and spice roads. If you're not sure about those, you can get some good books on it and read them, but they're the trade routes that went all the way from China, all the way into Norway, all the way down into the southern tip of Africa, all the way into North Africa. I mean, it went all around the world, but the bottleneck for the silk roads and for the spice roads, of course, was Israel. That's what makes Israel the most important piece of property ever on the face of the earth, because that's where all the information also went through, not just the trade routes. You have trade, you have news. That's how it worked. So these people somehow knew about what was going on. So you have these names mentioned, and the names are always a bit of a problem with people. Now I've got to go back to my old page back here just a second. Let me go back to that right there. There we are. There's a lot of speculation that, for instance, you heard the word Rosh mentioned. That must be the Russians, right? The Russians. It's not the Russians. It never was. The Russians were a group of people that much later was a tribe called the Rus, and they were slavers. And they ran up and down the spice roads to sell people all the way from Norway in Damascus. And eventually they just were the Russians or the Russians. Rosh was something different. Let me go down this list, and I know what's going to happen with this, that those of you that are about to teach this or interested in this sort of thing, you're going to say, can I have your notes? And the answer is absolutely you can, because you ain't going to be writing them down now, are you? But here it is. Togarmah, Cappadocia, near a place called Malatya. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Malatya. That would be Cappadocia. Togarmah. Gomer, Cappadocia, all the way up to southern Russia. Magog, the northeast Black Sea region. Now, I'm going to stop right there for a second, because you say, okay, this is like, I need a map to see this. Yes, you do. The map that's on the bus even defines some of these areas. But here's the bigger deal. The commonality between those regions was one group of people that existed between 900 BC and 200 BC, when they finally just sort of got absorbed into the countryside, so to speak. They were known as the Scythians, or Scythians, or Scythians. You can call them what you want. I'll call them Scythians. What they were a horse people. They were a non-literate people. We don't want to say illiterate. They just didn't have a written language, so there was nothing to learn how to read. And they were really, really good on horseback. In fact, they were so good that the Mongols actually stole some of their technology. The Scythians were absolutely notorious and renowned both for creating a stirrup that was more like a plate, that you could stand up on the plate while you're riding the horse and pivot your body in any direction you wanted to go and securely launch an arrow at your enemy. Nobody had ever seen anything like it until then, and these guys invented the technology. They were extremely adept, they were extremely dangerous, and they were all over the place. They're what you could call sort of a nomadic empire, went all the way to the borders where the Turks came from eventually when they moved in from the east. So they ended up over there. They also went all the way up into parts of Mongolia, and when they started conquering, they ended up right here. They spread out into this area. Now, they weren't here very long, but apparently they made a very big impression. The Scythians were a people who didn't really do much agriculture. Now, don't write that off. I'm not giving you excessive detail. Think about this for a second. When Miletus, you guys know Miletus, Acts chapter 20. Miletus led a revolt against Persia. Persia had conquered this land. They owned this land. And they also conquered further over into Thrace. You know what's in Thrace, and really what the big deal in Thrace is? Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul, southern Thrace. They conquered all of that area. They conquered all the way down into parts of Macedonia. This is what they owned. And suddenly Miletus comes up with a rebellion. Sardis jumps in on it, very, very important, powerful cities. And in comes, of course, Persia, starting with Cyrus, having to put this thing down. Well, Cyrus isn't successful in it, and he eventually dies. And along comes finally Xerxes. We already talked about him before. And Battle of Thermopylae, Marathon, all of that stuff. But Xerxes comes in, and and he can't do much. And finally, excuse me, I got a little ahead of myself there. Let me back up. Darius pops in before Xerxes. Did I get that right? Yes, Darius before Xerxes, right. So Darius comes in. He's trying to put down the revolt, and the Scythians attack him. And so he goes after them. The Persian army is moving up on the west edge of the Black Sea, and they're chasing this horde of Scythians that attacked him, and what they didn't realize is the Scythians had baited him. They wanted to wipe out that part of the Persians. And they knew one thing that the Persians didn't know. The Scythians didn't have any supplies for the Persians to raid. They were a decentralized people, kind of like ISIS. Same type of hitting, sort of a cut, slash, and run philosophy. And Darius chased the Scythians all the way up to the north edge of the Black Sea and up into the southern part of the Russian steppes. And then they finally drew up the battle lines. There was no place for the Persians to retreat. There was no food in the villages of the cities. For what cities there were, they were like villages for the Scythians. There was nothing for them to eat, and this is how armies fed themselves. They would pillage people, they would take people's crops, and now they're getting hungry, and the Scythians say, all right, we're going to fight. So Darius draws up his battle lines, the Scythians draw up their battle lines, and then something happened that terrified Darius. A rabbit runs right through the battle lines, right up the middle. And the Scythians break ranks and happily chase the rabbit. And Darius looks at his men and said, we need to leave now, because these people thought so lightly of their lives and battle that they would chase a rabbit while drawing up battle lines against the Persians, and the Persians were hungry. They realized that they were about to be overwhelmed because the Scythians had the passion. And Darius backed off and never encountered them on the battle lines again. The Scythians are widely known throughout this area. And they were associated with Togarmah, Cappadocia. Gomer, Cappadocia, southern Russia, and the Scythians, Magog, the northern, northeast, and parts of the west Black Sea regions, once again, the Scythians. So what does this have to do with Ezekiel 38? This is the question that you guys are going to have to do your own homework on, because when Ezekiel prophesies this, God is speaking, he's saying on the day when this comes, when it does finally happen, this part of the story is going to be like the Scythians, a very dangerous people coming down from the far north. A mixture of people perhaps coming down from the far north, perhaps even a decentralized people, and a people that are inherently dangerous to anybody that they get in contact with. By the way, the Scythians are in the New Testament. You knew this, didn't you? Of all the places, one place we're going to encounter tomorrow at the end of the day. Colossians chapter 3, verse 11. Here there is no Greek and Jew, circumcised, uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. They were known even in New Testament times, and they were feared, even though they were gone. Interesting, isn't it? So, other places that you run into in Ezekiel 38, Meshach, which would be the tribe of the Mushki. I like that word in English anyway, the Mushki, which is central Anatolia. Meshach and Tubal were neighbors. Midas was the king over that region. Gog, we'll get to him. Tubal, northern Cappadocia, central Anatolia, perhaps had a connection with Tarsus. Rosh was connected with Meshach and Tubal, and Gog was the king of Magog. And Magog apparently were the Scythians. Now, some of you can say, oh great, so we're sitting here talking about this, and I really don't care, and I'm tired. But you know you're going to teach this. And geography in the Bible tells most of the story. It always has. Remember that that geography is not irrelevant in the Bible, and modern interpretations like Rosh being Russia, big mistake. Go back and find out who these people were, because I wanted to tell you here, you're right where these people were. This is the area. So you're not looking at an abstraction of Ezekiel 38 and 39. You're looking at the place where these people lived and were named. You're in it right now up to your necks. So take a good look around and try and understand what the people who originally read Ezekiel 38 and 39, and even the Colossians, understood about the people that were here and how it will play into some prophetic battle sometime, either before or during, whenever it's going to take place, but I think before the last 7 years of Earth's history. There you go. I just wanted to brief you on that because we talk about it so much, and I just wanted you to walk away from here knowing that you're sitting right in the middle of it. There you go.